So welcome. My name's Fatima. I'm the chair of the Welsh Medical Students Committee. I'm also here with Dan, who's part of the Welsh Resident Doctors Committee, and John, who's part of the negotiating team for BMA. So I'm also here with Danielle, who's our part of our secretariat for WMSC. She's a massive part of helping us when it comes to planning events like this and supporting students. And Sarah is our deputy chair. So just a quick intro to everybody, but everybody will get a chance to talk, and you'll hear from everybody shortly. Just to remind people, Siobhan is going to be recording, so this session will be recorded, so it can be posted online in case anybody needs to refer back to it for further information. And everybody's mics and cameras will be turned off because we're currently using the Teams Q&A function. So if you've got any questions, put them through the Q&A function, and we can answer those at the end, as they come. Okay. Can I just get a thumbs up? Does that make sense with everybody? Okay, fab. So we'll just get started. I'm going to pass it over to Dan and John, and they can start talking us through.
Cool. Great. Diolch. Noswaith da, everyone. My name is Dan Jones. I'm a public health registrar. So it's a very long time since I was a medical student. I'm deputy chair of the Welsh Resident Doctors Committee. I'm looking after terms and conditions. So we'll just go through the presentation for you today, and just pop questions in the chat as we go, and we'll do a bit of a Q&A at the end as well. So first off is just how we got here. So there was an attempted contract negotiation before running from 2019 to 2022, so quite a while ago, and a deal was put to members back then, but it was rejected. And then a new committee was elected for Welsh resident doctors, and that prioritised the campaign for full pay restoration. And then that culminated in a ballot and and 3 rounds of industrial action that ran in 2024, and that pushed Welsh Government into a negotiated pay deal. And part of that pay deal was to re-enter contract talks and to look at potential contract reform. So then, off the back of that, we did a whole series of engagement events, and that mainly focused on current resident doctors, because we're building this for posterity. But we did workplace events, we did all kinds of online events, we did a survey, and we also reviewed contracts in different countries, different types of doctor contracts. And we looked through both medical student and resident doctor conference policy, just to give us some steers in the space. And then the Resident Doctors Committee oversees contract negotiations, so they put together a mandate. That mandate was set, and a team of negotiators was selected and trained up. And then a deal was reached in July. The committee decided that was good enough to put to membership, and then once we had Cabinet Secretary approval from Welsh Government, that package could then go forward to members. So what's on offer? So we still are committed to full pay restoration. We still have our pay campaign. So for anyone who's new to this, unfortunately, resident doctors' pay since 2008 has been eroded by inflation. So this is showing what's happened to our pay over time when we measure our pay against retail price index inflation. And the choice of the start date basically relates to the start of the austerity period, and when we started to see the pay review body that is meant to make independent assessments and recommendations on our pay, when we started to see that politicized, and we went from a situation where we'd actually had decades of our pay staying quite stable in terms of inflation to suddenly seeing our pay eroded. And the bottom point was in that 2022 period. So it got down to 29.6%. You can see then we've started to recover this quite well. We had our pay offer and that bumped it up. There was then a subsequent pay award, which bumped it up further. And then the lower dash line basically shows the pay award for this year, which makes a bit of progress, but is ultimately not good enough in our view. But the orange line shows what the additional contract investment, the difference that makes. So there's an additional 4% going in as part of the contract reform process. Generally, we count that most of that is going into pay. Generally, we count any investment in the resident doctor workforce or contract as progress towards pay restoration. So you can see that if the contract were to be accepted, we'd end up with 16.1% pay erosion left. So almost about halfway there and getting back to a level of pay that we hadn't seen since 2014, 2015. So and much more in the kind of pace that we need to be making. So you see, we can't get full pay restoration one go, but this represents good going progress forwards. And then in terms of what that pay system looks like, so I will try and talk through the current contract and stuff as well as we go through, but we do have some talks on our YouTube channel about that for incoming foundation doctors, I should say. But the new one is an hours-based model. So that is your basic pay, and then a payment for any additional hours you work, a payment for any unsocial hours you work, and then any non-resident on-call payments. So I'll go through all of these in turn, but basically it tops up and that gives you a total pay package. The 2002 contract gives you your basic pay, and then if you're less than full time, that gets prorated by however part-time you are, and you get a banding supplement on top of that. And the banding supplement is they have lots of different criteria, and they're basically a function of how frequent your shifts are and how many hours in the shifts are taking place out of hours versus in hours. Right, so basic pay first. So these are the pay scales for both the current contract, which is 2002, and then the new contract or the proposed contract, I should say. So at the moment, the F1 and F2 points are split up on the 2002 one, and basically what those extra points are is years of prior experience. So depending on if you've had a different kind of NHS career or the like, it's usually experience of the grade. So we don't really see many people getting anything beyond minimum, but in theory you can, and then you progress a bit higher up. What we've done for F1s and F2s in the proposed contract is basically consolidate all the points, and then there's additional investment into basic pay, and we've moved some of the total pay from later in your career forwards to in your career, so that your early career pay gets a boost, your career average earnings end up a bit better, and essentially you're getting a bit more of your pay when it matters most versus later on when you're earning a lot more anyway. And so most F1s at the moment would, if they're starting full time in Wales, they'll start on the 35,390. So that's the very bottom of the pay scale. Whereas on the proposed contract, they start on 40,000 for basic pay. And then there's F1 and F2 points in the proposed contract. And then once you get past your foundation years on both contracts, it's then just determined by how many years of service you have after foundation. Both contracts run that. It's just with the proposed one, you go up every 2 years rather than one. So that's why you see the bigger jumps. But again, it's a consolidated, simpler pay scale. There's a front loading of pay, and you can see that generally the basic pay points are higher under the proposed one than the current one. And the again, just you may be aware, but if after your foundation years you take time out of training, you go off and do research, you go and work abroad, substantively, you do a clinical fellowship year rather than continue straight into training, that time generally can be counted towards your pay progression, so you don't lose anything by taking any time out of training, just to help. And that's the same under both contracts. And I guess the big things for medical students or foundation doctors that we could kind of think of was generally that higher early career pay. Basic pay is pensionable, whereas all of the other top up of pay on both contracts isn't. So generally having more of your money in basic pay is very good for your pension. Our pension scheme is career average earnings. It's not final salary. So even as an F1 doctor or an F2 doctor, you are contributing to your pension, and the amount of pensionable pay you get will affect what your pension is at the end. And there are gender ethnicity pay gaps. By shortening the pay scales, again, we're generally helping to reduce those. This would be the highest F1 basic pay in the UK. And then one of the other things we're quite cognizant of is when F1s and F2s are doing community placements, being on quite low basic pay levels can mean can hit people quite hard, particularly if they're part-time. And so just having more of the money in basic pay rather than in the banding supplements or the out of hours pay means that there's a bit more stability and consistency and a higher baseline between rotations, even if you're not doing any additional work on a rotation, for instance, because you're doing GP or because you're in a supernumerary post. And then the last thing was just student debt impact. So we've not properly modeled this, and it's quite difficult because you can make all kinds of different career choices and decisions. But generally, if you run straight through, then because this is boosting your early career pay and you're getting higher career average earnings, it should mean that you pay off your student loan a bit faster than you would under the current 2002 contract. So that's your basic pay. If you're less than full time, then you get it as a function of basic pay. So it's your total hours. So if you're 80% on a 48-hour rota a week, then you might end up on 38 hours on average a week. So yeah, that just works out your basic pay. So it would be 38 divided by 40 times the pay point, and that ends up. So if you're part-time, you don't get these additional hours payments, but you do get higher basic pay, if that makes sense. And if you are full-time, then generally the average hours per week should be 40. Some weeks will be more than 40, some will be less. That's the way it works, but the average needs to be 40 across a rota. You can get up to 48 hours on average a week rostered for you. And essentially this means that every that all of the hours that you are rostered above 40 hours a week, you get paid for additionally on top of it in this new system. And that's generally at the going rate of the normal basic pay. You then get your out of hours payments. So this is essentially a top up bonus. So the plain time definition in the 2002 contract. So this is what's considered normal working time, is 7 to 7 Monday to Friday. I appreciate that's not 9 to 5, and obviously in an ideal world it would be 9 to 5, and we have argued for it to be 9 to 5. But under the current contract, it's 7 to 7 Monday to Friday. We've managed to retain that, but expand it slightly by clarifying out of hours as being as including bank holidays, whereas previously it didn't. And basically, any hours that you work outside of plain time get paid at 1.5 the hourly rate, so you get a top up to your pay for working them, like essentially time and a half. And then this won't be too relevant to foundation doctors, but prospectively later on in your career, you may end up working something called non-residential on call. So this is when you're working at home, but you are available to give telephone advice or to return to site to come back to work. So certain surgical specialties do this. Some of the medical specialties do it as well. And the system that this would have is just getting an availability supplement for every hour you're on call for. That's half the normal rate because you're not normally expected to work during it, but you are available. And then if you do work, then you claim that time, and it gets topped up depending on what time of day it occurs. And generally, if you have a busy shift, so you work more than 75% of the shift, you get paid for the whole thing. So that's the pay. And then one of the other issues tends to be overtime. So this is when you have to stay late or work beyond your rostered hours, which unfortunately is something we see a lot in medicine. And currently, the 2002 operates something called rota monitoring, which is essentially time sheet exercise for everyone on the rota. And we've had a lot of difficulty in that, in terms of getting people to complete enough of the timesheets and getting enough people on the rota to do it. And it's only if it's a valid, proper exercise that will get a result, and then that may or may not change the banding supplement. So it's quite a clunky system that relies on everyone pitching in, and generally our experience is been that we've struggled to get it to work properly for all kinds of reasons, and certain employers have tried to work around it as well, shall we say. With the proposed contract, what we've done is just a simple overtime claim system. So if you do have to stay late, then you would just claim that time back, and you wouldn't need kind of electronic proof that you did it. You wouldn't need to go to your supervisor. It would be much like claiming an expense, and there are already NHS staff groups that do this. Some of them just do it through an app. But you essentially do it through a rostering system or the like, and then you'll get the money in your next payroll system. So the proposed contract will mean that if you do any overtime, you will get paid for it, whereas that wasn't necessarily true on the current 2002 one. Yeah, we got this site, so it's just not that I necessarily expect people, medical students, to be delving into rotas and the like, but it's just to say that if you do go on our web pages and stuff and start looking at our pay journeys, or people start talking to you about rotas and stuff, it's just when you're attempting to work out what your pay would be, it's just important when you're thinking about average hours to account for your leave. So you get your annual leave, you get study leave and public holidays, etc. Those effectively need to be taken out of the rota in order to make your calculations. So you may work an 8-week rota, but that isn't actually what you use to calculate your average hours, basically. But this is explained in a bit more detail on our web pages if you are interested. And we just thought we'd do an example in terms of working this out. So this is a F1 on a general medical rota. So it's 1A banding on the current one. So they get their basic pay, the 35,390 at the moment, and then they have 50% banding. That's what 1A means. So that gives about 53,000 total. On the proposed contract, once we kind of deducted the leave, this works out about 47 average total hours a week, and then 15.75 of those hours are on social, and that is pretty typical of a gen med rota. And you can see how that breaks down is they get their basic pay. So you can see they're getting a lot more pension pay into this than the other one. And then they get 7,000 for the additional hours. And then they get another 7,800 or so for working those unsocial hours. And the total pay is a bit higher on the proposed one than this one. And if they did any overtime, they'd be able to claim that and get paid a bit more as well. I won't go through this. This is just showing the difference that deducting leave makes. So you might see, if you look at some straightforward rotas, you might see that the hours may not look as generous, but it's important to deduct leave for exactly this reason. And this is just showing how it works with. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I thought I'd quickly jump in because obviously you mentioned with the self-reporting overtime in the new system. I thought I just quickly would clarify is that rather than having it rota monitored for all residents, now it's kind of an honours system that's occasionally audited. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so it
Yeah,
wouldn't so normal counter fraud checks that you get with expenses.
exactly.
So you would just like you do when you put in an expense, you have to essentially tick a box to confirm that it is a genuine claim and that you're not fraudulent. Again, with all of this, like fraud's a criminal offence and it will result in fitness to practice issues. So that should be disincentive enough to do any fraud. But you do that, and then if the payroll team noted anything suspicious, then they may seek to clarify it with yourself. And if there was anything particularly alarming, then potentially it's something that could be referred to the counter fraud unit in the NHS, which is exactly what would happen if you were doing stuff with your expenses or the like as well. So it is just normal bread and butter processes, rather than, yeah, as you say, trying to run it through a rota monitoring process, which we found difficult to work through.
Just to clarify, because it's quite I think people might be wondering like what actually is going to happen under the new contract to replace the rota monitoring. So I thought just worth mentioning so people, know this. There is still a system there. It's just
Yeah.
a little bit more trust in you to fill out the form correctly, and then a team will kind of look at it every so often. But sorry, I cut you off. You carry on.
Yeah, no, I'm probably not selling. So we had a lot of feedback on that. Generally, what resident doctors tell us is that the rota monitoring systems do not work, and therefore this is an attempt to come up with a better alternative. In England, there's something called exception reporting, and they're going to talk about exception reporting in a minute. And that encountered issues as well because you had to spell out the episode, what happened. Generally, you had to get supervisor approval, and it generally defaulted to giving you time off in lieu, which became very difficult and clunky to take. And generally, particularly in some departments, it ended up in quite a toxic atmosphere. And supervisors coming down on people in terms of like staying late is just the done thing, etc. The thing about this system is your department isn't involved, your supervisor isn't involved. It's effectively between you and payroll, and you are just trusted to accurately report your hours, and you'll just get it default as pay. And it's all a lot simpler, a lot more straightforward, and a lot less confrontational, and it doesn't rely on other doctors doing it as well. It's just yourself. Just the last thing on pay is an example pay journey. So hopefully this comes through well, but this is total pay. And it's just to give a sense of an idea of what happens over career. So I picked GP just for simplicity's sake. We're mainly focusing on the F1 and F2s. So these were quite conventional F1 and F2s where they're doing a mix of medical and surgical rotas. And you can see that generally the proposed contract, you would earn more pay. And then with the GP years, the first year of GP generally is normally a series of medical rotations. Sometimes you do peds or obs and gynae, and you can see that there tends to be a big jump there. And this is effectively the front loading of the contract. And then as you get a bit further on into your career, you're still quite out ahead, but the pay starts to get a bit more comparable because as I say, the pay's been front loaded a bit earlier, but you can still see that the proposed contract is out earning for these ST2, ST3 GP years. So this is just to give a flavour, and we've got more pay journeys on our web pages. But if you were to follow this career path, then this is what the differences in earnings on the proposed versus the current one. And you can see generally it's quite favourable. There's safety and training aspects as well. So at the moment, you generally just get given a duty roster, and that's it. What we are keen is that this will actually be a proper training contract. And so this would introduce job planning, and the job plans would set out the training objectives, the staffing levels on each shift, and even as an F1, you get something called educational development time, and this is meant to be protected time for you to do your portfolio, to work on research, potentially audit, quality improvement, etc. So just these kind of activities that are important to do, but you will struggle to do in a busy board environment. So all of that will get properly codified and contractualized in a job plan. And then you'll get your roster, which spells out your actual shifts as well. And there's clear there aren't any timelines with the current 2002 contract, but with this one there would be. So you get your duty roster 6 weeks before you start the placement, and you get your generic job plan 8 weeks before you start the placement. And if those are late, then the employer gets fined. So they're very incentivized to get all of this to you on time. And there should be a facility there for you to book leave and stuff in advance. So we find a lot of issues with people getting their rotas like very late, sometimes even after they've started the placement, and it's just very difficult to plan your lives or anything around that. And there are going to be a lot more safety protections in the proposed one versus the current one. I won't go into much detail on this because you won't necessarily have that much experience of working the current one. But these are some of the things that would come in, and these we've got a contract comparison document on our web pages, but these go a lot further than the current one. In particular, long shifts and nights, which I wouldn't envy yourselves having to work them. I haven't had to work a set of nights for a while now, but yeah, in particular, you can end up with some nasty patterns on the current one, even now, unfortunately. Whereas with the proposed one, you'd only be able to do 4 of them in a row, and then you'd get 48 hours rest, no matter what. Whereas I've seen patterns even now where you'll do 4 nights, you get 1 day, and then you're straight back into normal working, or you'll do a set of normal shifts and then go into the set of 4 or 5 long shifts. So generally a bit better from that perspective. And you get an extra 30-minute break on night shifts as well, compared to now, and all the breaks remain paid. And then on a similar theme, there's some good stuff there in terms of rest facilities and too tired to drive home provisions. So again, like seeing these issues where people do night shifts, but then they don't feel safe to drive themselves home the next day. And again, this is putting duties on the employer to either pay for a taxi or to arrange for you to stay in an on-call room or a hotel nearby, so you can get the rest you need, and then you can drive home. And again, we don't currently have these protections in the current contract. There's other fatigue and facility stuff as well, like hot food out of hours, for example, and parking. And then the free F1 accommodation offer is still there. That is a long-standing policy. So whatever happens with this referendum, that policy stays in place. But we have contractualized in the proposed contract the accommodation standards around that. So there's quite a lot of good stuff in there. I put some of the stuff there in terms of not just giving you a bed in a bedroom, but actually getting you all kinds of furniture, getting you like properly equipped kitchen dining areas, like clarifying rules around your linen changes and your towel changes and stuff. And there's more in it than that. But currently, although we have the policy, it can be quite difficult to enforce. Whereas by putting it into the contract, again, that just gives us a bit more leverage against any employer. Leave. So generally when you start, you get 28 days leave. And again, there's some new stuff with the proposed one. So at the moment, you can still get something called fixed leave, which is when the employer basically books the leave for you and tells you it will be on these days. and we don't currently have automatic rights to things like shared parental leave or compassionate leave or bereavement leave or leave for life-changing events. So all of that will get introduced, and you'll be able to have access to it. And similarly, being able to book leave more than 6 weeks in advance. And then I did mention exception reporting earlier. So there will be exception reporting introduced. This is different to the overtime reporting. This will just be for safety and training issues. And again, this is between yourself, your educational supervisor, and something called the Guardian of Safe Working, which I'll talk about in the next slide. But essentially, this just means that if you're ever put into a dangerous situation where there's too few staff, and you're having to cross cover, anything like that, or you don't get your educational development time, your protected time, then you'll be able to put in reports about it and get compensated for it. And again, it's all overseen by these are some examples of the kind of things that you could exception report for, and it's all overseen by someone called the Guardian of Safe and Flexible Working. And they are a senior independent doctor, and they will monitor the overtime and the exception reporting patterns. They can levy fines on employers and stuff, and they will convene a forum of all the resident doctors in the employer on a regular basis. And there you can discuss workplace issues. Your BMA reps will be involved with that as well. And if there's any money that's been raised from fines, it gets spent there on things like doctor wellbeing and training and the like. The main thing just to say for yourselves is that if this goes through, then this is the contract you would start on, and that's basically it. There's stuff for people who are currently on the 2002 one, but I won't go into it because you will just start on this one from August 2026. This is more from like F2 onwards, but when you do get study budget and study leave, we've just generally negotiated a more generous settlement with that, and some positive changes. And generally, we're looking to improve the study budget as we go forward, but there's some good quick fixes there. And then again, this may seem quite far away, but we're very cognizant of the employment situation now, and people struggling to find training posts when they finish F2. So these have become known as training bottlenecks, and there's quite a few of them at different stages of training. There's one after F2, unfortunately. And again, this is, we've already had some training post expansion recommended, and hopefully that gets implemented following a lot of our lobbying. But part of the package would be us sitting down with employers, Welsh Government and HIW to go through the bottlenecks properly and come up with some solutions that may involve creating some more extra posts and the like. And yeah, I mean, we did make some concessions and stuff. I think the main ones that are relevant for yourselves are the extra 4%. Ideally, we would like more, but that was the limit. That was even with the threat of industrial action. So we don't think that we could have been able to have got more without actually undertaking strike action. So that is the compromise level. And yeah, there's a lot more detailed version of this on our web pages, but just to talk about some of the key differences between this one, the current one, and the one in England. And hopefully you can get to see from this that it's got some things from the English contract, some things from the current one. It is its own thing, and it is quite unique and bespoke, and like pertains to like our situation in Wales. Generally, I think it builds on both of them and has a lot of advantages and benefits of compared to the other two. But there's a lot more detailed version of that on the web pages if you're interested. And again, it might be relevant to any decisions you make about foundation school, etc. in the near future. And then I'm not sure how much you'll be aware of banding or have thought about it, because that has been one of the things in the general debate with resident doctors, is this move from banding towards hours worked. Some people really like bands, and the idea was you get big bonuses in pay, and it's quite a simple system that's seen to roughly be fair. But I've talked about some of them already. There were a few disadvantages associated it with as well. Pensionable pay and earnings, and then because the banding criteria tend to be all or nothing, quite a lot of scenarios where people work very different patterns but end up with the same pay, or equally people end up with different pay despite working similar patterns, etc. And that's just the kind of jumps that you get with banding. And then the rota monitoring system, again, that's the only way that banding works, and our struggles with that. There was a lot of consensus that wasn't working. And then equally, members were also very keen to be able to claim overtime properly, and to get personalised pay. So pay for their specific rota shift, so that if you work more nights on a rota than the other people on the rota, you get more pay, for example. So because of that, that's why the committee decided to shift away from banding. But it's a choice of two pay systems, and only you can make that choice. So sorry for talking so much, but I'll hand back over to Fatima just to go through the last few slides about the referendum.
Okay, thank you, Dan, for going through everything. So we'll quickly just go over basically why we've given this talk, which is because there is the referendum now, and final year medical students in Wales are able to vote on this. So the referendum opened yesterday on the 24th of November. It's going to continue to be open till the 15th of December. So you can vote on how you feel about this contract, whether you want it accepted or rejected, etc., etc. You can put your thoughts there. The only thing to keep in mind, I'm not sure if it's it's not mentioned later on, but the only thing to remember is that to vote in the referendum, you need to be a member of the BMA by the night. Oh, sorry, it is there. It was the next one. But you need to be a member by the 9th of December. So if you're not a BMA member at the moment, that's okay. And you want to vote, that is okay. But you do need to join by the 9th to be able to vote. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, so sorry, I'm just making sure. Have I covered everything? Yeah. So
We just got, this is just a QR code to the website and stuff as well. And we answer a lot of information on there, but we've got an email there as well if you do have any more questions.
Yes, that is there as well. But yeah, so those are just the dates to keep in mind, to take a note of, if you are a final year and want to vote in this referendum. But yeah.